Good morning. Welcome to the inaugural edition of AIRC Day, our first annual review for what we've done over the course of this past year as part of the Acquisition Innovation Research Center. As most of you know, it was established by Congress to improve acquisition outcomes through applied research that goes beyond papers and recommendations, hopefully towards implementation in the form of models, experiments, and pilots that we can learn from and then scale that research to the level of the enterprise. You will see some of the research today. What you will not see is the effort that has gone into the governance and the setting up of the structures to help us achieve the intent of AIRC, the extent to which we've engaged the community. And so a lot of that work has led to what the discussion we're going to have today, our keynote speech, our panel discussion, and of course the briefings and the demonstrations in the afternoon today. It would be appropriate, I think, as I kick this off, for me to recognize the Acquisition Innovation Advisors, our sponsors within the DoD, who've been the source of a lot of counseling, a lot of insight, a lot of mentoring, and a lot of support as we've identified our priorities that we ought to focus on within AIRC. I'd also like to recognize the Acquisition Innovation Panel, folks that have given their time and insights in engaging with us from an external point of view, and of course all our stakeholders in the legislative branch. On a personal level, I would say the person who has cajoled us the most, been our biggest critic and our biggest supporter has been Mr. Mark Crisco. Without his support, this day would not be what it is, and something that I'm truly looking forward to. Before I begin, though, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dr. Paul Kaminski. Dr. Paul Kaminski is the chair of our advisory board, and I've requested him to say a few words as we kick off today's events. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Dinesh. Well, we've always had a day-long System Engineering Research Council research review like this one for the past dozen or so years. Today is our inaugural Acquisition Innovative Research Center AIRC Day. And it will be a great start with what I see are more than 450 registered for these activities. Congress established AIRC to allow academia to support the DoD's desire to improve our acquisition outcomes through innovation and applied research, and to go beyond white papers and recommendations. In this spirit, our program features 4 demonstrations, one focused on digital acquisition and engineering, the second on the notion of a policy flight simulator, in quotes. The third on analytic workbenches to allow better decision-making relating to our mission engineering and our portfolio management. And the fourth on the analysis of architectures to enhance our cyber resilience, something that has been missing in the past and very important. I want to thank the leadership within USD A&S and also R&E for supporting this AIRC effort and also supporting the SERC and engaging with our academic community in some of our hard and important problems. This type of engagement takes me back about 40 years, amazingly 40 years, when I had the privilege of working on the F-117 program, part of our stealth efforts. In that program, I insisted that before we began testing the F-117 against the threat air defenses, that we develop digital models of both the F-117 and the defenses so that we could make a priori predictions of the test results before we actually did the test. This was a very challenging process because our models did not make good predictions. They were missing so many important elements. And over time, we learned what those elements were and inserted them in the models. We did this working with academia, in this case, the MIT Lincoln Labs and others. And we developed the models and used them to route the F-117 in combat. They were extremely effective. We have not lost any lives with these stealth aircraft in combat. And today, when we look back at these models, we would call them digital twins. So something new and different today, but like many things, the concept actually went way back. Our first digital twins 40 years ago. So our emphasis today is not only to talk, but to do. And so let me introduce the real doer behind what's going on today, Dinesh Verma. Dinesh, thanks for all you've done and thanks for your leadership.
I appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for those remarks, Paul. What I'd like to do is introduce our keynote speaker for today, but I think Mr. O'Donnell will indulge me a 30-second pause. I'd like to recognize something that happened on this day 21 years ago. Today, 21 years ago, the International Space Station was commissioned. And the commanding officer of the International Space Station at the time that it was commissioned was Bill Shepard, who happens to be in the audience with us. Thank you, Shep. Let me introduce to you our keynote speaker for today's activities, Mr. Chris O'Donnell. Mr. O'Donnell is currently performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. In this position, he advises the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of Defense on matters relating to the DoD acquisition system, acquisition program management, and the development of strategic space intelligence, tactical warfare, command and control, and business systems. Mr. O'Donnell was appointed to the SES in August of 2015. He's been involved with all phases of DoD acquisition, sustainment, research, and engineering since joining the Defense Acquisition Workforce in 1984. As the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Platform and Weapon Portfolio Management, he's also responsible for managing and analyzing major platform and weapons capability portfolios across the department. He served as the Executive Director of the JRAC until March of 2019. He was a staff specialist for the Joint Ground Robotics Enterprise prior to coming to the JRAC. He started in the Pentagon as a staff specialist in the JRAC, providing rapid responses to warfighter needs and assisting in providing equipment to the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. He has a mechanical engineering degree from Clarkson University. Chris has been recognized by numerous awards over the course of his career. What I'd like to say at the end is he's got 3 kids. 2 of them are engineers. 1 of them is an architect, and 1 of his engineers is a Hokie. So you know he's a good egg. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Dinesh. Good morning, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning, and I look forward to a great discussion today on ways to continue improving defense acquisition together. It's a very exciting time to be in acquisition in the Department of Defense. You know, over the last few years, we've introduced the adaptive acquisition framework, and that has really given us a whole lot of new ways to look at how we do actual acquisition. And what we're really working on right now in the department is how do we combine those the things that we have done to reform acquisition, along with how do we reform our requirements process through JSIDs and our PVE process on how we resource things in order for us to really create an advantage, a competitive advantage over our peer competitors right now. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to our AIRC team and my acquisition enablers organization for bringing this forum together. I looked through the program and I'm really impressed with the breadth of things that we're going to discuss today. And I see that Dr. Jim Moreland, another Hokie, is out there getting ready to talk about all the great work that he's done with mission engineering and how he's influenced what we're doing in the department today. Our purpose in the defense acquisition system is to deliver secure, resilient, and preeminent capabilities to our warfighters and international partners. Against the backdrop of strategic competitors, today's landscape is constantly evolving, and our approach to acquisition must have the flexibility to adapt. Developing capabilities should be guided by mission engineering, a means to achieve desired warfighting effects through scoped requirements, guided development, and informed investment to directly link programs with the missions they must accomplish. The Deputy Secretary of Defense recently has established a rider program to look at experimentation and how that can help us identify, experiment with, and field capabilities more quickly to the warfighter. We need to evaluate missions holistically as a system of systems to illuminate mission architectures. They are the business model for the conduct of operations and identify the interactions and capabilities to achieve desired objectives. As an acquisition enterprise, which you're now a part of, we should be centering our resources, innovation, and expertise on the critical linkages that enable the warfighter to complete these kill chains. In many ways, we began that process in recent years with a comprehensive redesign of the department's acquisition policy. The result is the adaptive acquisition framework, which has 6 distinct pathways to empower program teams to tailor their approaches. One of the nicest compliments I've gotten at a recent meeting was an Air Force lieutenant walked up to me and thanked me for being part of establishing the pathways, especially the mid-tier acquisition pathway, because it gave him a lot more opportunities to tailor his program to get capabilities more quickly to the warfighter. And I thought that was really important because here's somebody at the lieutenant level who's going to spend the next 20, 25 years of his career trying to help the warfighter and is trying to really understand how do we get things through these tailored processes. And as we continue to driving that cultural shift to embrace the flexibilities afforded by the adaptive acquisition framework, the framework alone is not enough for defense acquisition to pace the threat. A holistic approach to enterprise acquisition is necessary, one that integrates policies and processes at the micro level, but also aligns other key aspects of defense acquisition at the macro level to drive competitive advantage. The fielding and sustainment of capabilities is intrinsically linked to requirements generated through the JSIDS process and resourcing through the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process, better known as the PBBE. By integrating these 3 distinct yet interdependent processes, requirements, resourcing, and management, we can more effectively transition emerging technology across the proverbial valley of death. Ms. Heidi Hsu, our new Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, is making major investments in new and innovative technologies, and we really need to understand better how we can transition those technologies to capabilities for our warfighters. To truly identify and address interdependencies and critical risks, we must also broaden our assessments to include not just systems, but portfolios of systems. Such an outlook enables us to see not only the dots, but actually connect them to directly align decision-making with operational needs. As an example of this, we're building our portfolios now, and for vertical lift, we currently have 14 different programs going on in the Department of Defense to address vertical lift needs. If we started with a blank sheet of paper, we probably wouldn't have had all 14 of those programs. So doing this look from a portfolio perspective will get us a better idea of how to do things more effectively and efficiently. In light of this environment, the Acquisition Innovation Research Center, or AIRC, was created to help us address the Secretary and Deputy Secretary's strategic initiatives and provide new perspectives for improving the way we operate. We no longer have time or resources to continue doing acquisition the way we've historically done so. AIRC is applying diversity of thought from academia to addressing enduring challenges and barriers. The emphasis here is on applied. Paper studies alone don't help us. Recommendations alone don't help us. We must understand and apply tangible solutions to practical challenges and move out smartly. Now, I certainly recognize this is easier said than done, and especially challenging for the 22 universities in AIRC. That's why it's so critical that we engage collaboratively to ensure AIRC facilities, students, and researchers truly understand DoD problems at their core, can access our people and systems, and are fully engaged to pilot and experiment with new policies, processes, and most importantly, culture for innovation and agility. We in DoD also take ownership of this challenge, and this is why your participation here and in the days and months ahead is so valuable. So where are we going right now? I've asked AIRC and I've asked all of you to help us define and integrate best practices to achieve what we call digital acquisition. This is a significant opportunity to leverage and extend a number of practices to fundamentally change the way our acquisition functions and the system as a whole operates. These include application of digital engineering, continued adoption of modular open systems architectures, or MOSAs, and acceleration of modern development techniques such as Agile for both software and hardware. We are integrating these practices in a new digital acquisition and data strategy that takes the strategic and data challenges posed by Secretary Austin and Deputy Secretary Hicks and operationalizes them. It is important to emphasize that we are not just talking about collecting data and improving existing processes and analyses for better oversight. Rather, we're asking how data and models can serve as a basis for fundamentally improving acquisition functions themselves, particularly at the tactical level where acquisition is actually happening. This means in program management, market research, cost estimating, contract management, production, sustainment, and all other functions critical to acquiring capabilities. There are no magic bullets, but data and effective models can help us be more efficient and improve our ability to field capabilities that outpace the threat. So we are asking how digital acquisition can improve the way we assess capabilities at the portfolio level and across mission architectures. For example, we are adopting integrated acquisition portfolio reviews, or IAPRs, to strengthen synchronization of warfighting concepts, requirements, technologies, and program execution. At their core, these IAPRs are designed to foster insight and collaboration across DoD to regularly deliver integrated suites of capabilities. Can we use model-based acquisition to improve our understanding of both the critical mission threads and capabilities they require, and ultimately inform how we can pursue IAPRs and other related assessments? An interesting part of these IAPRs is we get the service acquisition executives together with other leaders in the Department of Defense to take a look at a mission thread and how it affects various portfolios. Two recent examples of this are the defense of Guam and how would we engage with a surface action group. In both of those situations, while we're doing a great job on the platforms and the weapons and various components that make up the mission architecture, the connectivity between those pieces is in question. And our ability to integrate those pieces together will give us that advantage that we want over our peer competitors. So as we go through the mission engineering process, we're looking for those missing interdependencies and how we hook things together. We are also asking how digital acquisition can improve and accelerate the critical elements that enable acquisition at the enterprise level. Things like requirements development, budgeting, intelligence, capability trade-offs, and our interfaces with Congress and the public. This also includes improving and enabling our most important asset, the acquisition workforce, and the culture and incentives that drive our people, organizations, and the industrial base. We recently met with one of our major industry providers and looking at some of their more recent work and questioning the progress of that work. We both came to the same conclusion that for the last 20 years, we haven't really pressed our large defense integrators to do things that are difficult. Things like the F-35 and the Columbia have stressed our engineering capabilities. But over the last 20 years, in focusing on violent extremists, we haven't done those hard peer-to-peer things that we need to do. So one of the questions we're asking ourselves is, do we have that defense acquisition workforce, not just here in the Department of Defense, but in our major contractors to perform these actions? And perhaps there's going to be a little bit of a learning process over the next 4 or 5 years as we once again build up that engineering expertise to ensure we can engage in peer competition. As we are all familiar, culture eats strategy for breakfast. We have an extraordinary workforce that wants to do the right thing, but they must be empowered with the right incentives that reflect where the department needs to go strategically. Otherwise, culture will just wait us out and return to the norm. And that is why our efforts cannot rest on technology alone. That's the beauty of AIRC. It brings to bear the full breadth of non-technical disciplines from academia to help us improve acquisition, from law, management, and business to education, economics, and even psychology and anthropology. All of these challenges are not new to us, but they are now ripe for advancement with new and innovative approaches. To my colleagues in DoD, invest yourself, your discipline, and your organization by actively engaging with AIRC. Help us understand your challenges and ideas and bring research faculty into the fold early and often. We need them to test and apply new ideas so we can make informed decisions and implement new approaches at scale. Reach out to Mark Crisco on my team, who has been instrumental in standing up and guiding AIRC, and to the forthcoming AIRC director. Together, we need to create the competitive advantage our warfighters and taxpayers expect of us, but we have to engage. Recent events around the world have shown once again that we need to understand how we're going to improve our capabilities to acquire things quickly. Our models of it takes 10 years to get things from a requirement to actual fielding are not going to work in peer-to-peer competition. We're really hoping that the AIRC will show us ways to increase productivity, increase efficiency, and reduce that acquisition time so we can get things that we really desperately need to get into the warfighter's hands. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here this morning, and now I'll take any questions you have.
Chris, I'll begin with thanking you for doing this keynote for us. We do have a few questions to kick this discussion off. The very first question I'd like to share with you is a question that alludes to any metrics that you have in place that might suggest that the adaptive acquisition pathways are in fact making a difference. So the question is, what sorts of metrics are you collecting or looking for that would suggest that these pathways are in fact making the difference that you're alluding to?
Great question, Dinesh. So I think the number one metric that we have right now is time. You know, that's something we can't buy back no matter how much money we have in the department. And what we're seeing by using the mid-tier acquisition pathway is that we can very quickly get a requirement established. Instead of it taking years, it takes months. We can then go into a rapid prototyping program and determine whether or not that capability is really something that's going to support the warfighter. Probably the two best examples of this right now are the intermediate SHORAD, short-range air defense system. The Army did an OTA and rapidly put capability onto Stryker vehicles. They did the testing very quickly, and 3 years later, they're out fielding 144 of the systems to give us a SHORAD capability. Normally, that would have taken over 10 years to do. The other great example that we have going on right now is IVAS. It's a new heads-up display for our warfighters that not only gives them the night vision and the low light vision and the IR vision that they want, it also gives them a heads-up display that allows us to display information. It was pretty amazing sitting inside of a Bradley fighting vehicle and looking left and right, and with the cameras on the outside of the vehicle, I was able to look and see what was going on outside of the vehicle, able to identify where enemy positions were and decide where were the best place to egress that Bradley was. I did get the opportunity to go into a shoot house with at the time, the acting Secretary of Defense and the Undersecretary for A&S with a modified M4 and go through a shoot house that had been established in a matter of hours to be able to do a training exercise. So we're working very closely with Microsoft, and we have finished the rapid prototyping portion of that program in a 3-year time frame. And now we're going into a rapid acquisition effort to buy hundreds of thousands of those heads-up displays. One of the things that we're pressed constantly with is, why aren't we working with more non-traditional, higher technology companies? So we're working directly with Microsoft, but even Microsoft has found that coming out with the first production heads-up displays has caused some problems. They had to go back to the drawing board a little bit and get better. So we're finding that while it is good to take what industry and the technology companies have developed, we learned a little bit about how hard it is to produce things to be used in a military environment, and now we're iterating with Microsoft. And again, that's something that probably would have taken us 10 years to get to the point where we were ready to field something, and we were ready to go to fielding in 3 years. And we probably have a 6 to 9 month delay while we fix things, but we're getting that capability much more faster into the warfighter's hands.
Thank you, Chris. Another question also relates to the adaptive acquisition framework. The question is, how does this framework incorporate digital-first thinking in the contracting process? And are relational contracting practices being considered also?
So on the first part, in order for us to be able to do things quickly, as Dr. Kaminski mentioned, we're building the digital twins early in the development process. Best example of that is the Air Force's program right now to put new engines on the B-52. The B-52 is still flying with the original engines, which makes it kind of hard to get parts for something that's almost 60 years old. So we very quickly took a look at what was available in industry. We did the digital twinning of those engines. We ran a competition, and we've recently selected Rolls-Royce to provide the engines to go into the next phase of the program, which is building the full interconnectivity between those engines and the B-52 itself, which is a fairly old airplane that we need to figure out exactly how we're going to build out that all digital cockpit in the B-52. So Dinesh, I'm trying to understand the relational part of the contracting. Can you clarify that a little bit?
Roberto, would you like to clarify that? We'll move on to the next question, Chris, and come back to this if time allows. The next question is, you actually mentioned in your talk the systemic process relating to the PPBE. There is talk about a proposed commission to reform the PPBE process. From your point of view, what sorts of results would you like to see from the commission?
So overall, I think the PPBE process serves us well. It makes us think. It gives Congress an opportunity to do their constitutional job of deciding what we're going to fund or not fund. Our budget is a proposal to them. But where the PPBE falls down is how do we quickly transition things that we see as opportunities that we can do in the near term to get a capability into the warfighter's hands. So I think the most important part of any look at the PPBE is how do we make decisions in what is normally a 2-year delay. If we have a great idea today, right now it's a little late to go into the 23 budget. It'll probably go into the 24 budget. So we're normally looking at a 2-year layoff between when we get done with something and when we can actually get the money to go ahead and continue with it. So we're looking at a number of methods to come up with some way to do a transition fund to help us do that. Let's keep the program going. Let's do some basic certification testing, a little more experimentation, some safety things until we can get that funding in place. And we're working very closely with the folks in R&E and the folks in the comptroller to look at the Raider program and what they're doing with the experimentation and putting together ideas on how would we use some sort of a fund to transition things that come out of Raider until we can get them fully into the PPBE process.
Thank you, Chris. I also wanted to let my colleagues who are in the room here with me know that I'm giving priority to the questions that are coming at us online. But if any of you want to ask questions, that would be the right mic to go to, and you're welcome to use it if you have a question in mind. Chris, the next question is slightly provocative. From your point of view, do you feel there are certain areas and disciplines where the current DoD industrial base does not have the technical expertise to be peer competitive?
So somewhat as a discussion we had with one of our larger contractors last week, I don't think we are technology deficient. I think we have not practiced the art of doing integration of major systems enough over the last few years to either at the DoD level or at the industry level to have the bench that's necessary to quickly get these more complex systems that we need for peer-to-peer competition out in the field. I think we'll be fine. I think we just in the department have to realize that we will have to pay for a little more testing than perhaps we wanted to, but that that testing will result in a workforce that is more able to deal with these harder problems. It's kind of an offshoot here, but I look at what has happened with the North Korean ballistic missile program, and when I first started looking at it back in 2016 or so, they were on the KN-08 rocket, which was not exactly the most modern rocket I've ever seen in my life. Well, now they're on the KN-32, and they've learned over time, grow that workforce, and as that workforce gets more and more adept, you can accelerate the things that you want to do. Our workforce does a great job of conceptualizing, coming up with new technology, but it's the nuts and bolts things of who's the industrial engineer who's looking at how it goes together, who's the production engineer who's putting it together, who's the test engineer to make sure that everything's going right in the test. It's a lot of those less glamorous things that we have to do that I think we have to build up that capability a little bit more, maybe even some of the capacity. We've let some of that atrophy in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Chris. I have to say that as you were giving your keynote, it was delightful for me to hear you emphasize aspects like digital acquisition, mission engineering, portfolio management. If you look at these three items, I'll go in reverse order. Portfolio management, mission engineering, and digital engineering. These are not disjoint sets. They're mutually dependent concepts. Are there challenges in your mind, which are the really tough challenges that we've got to resolve in order to realize the strategic intent relating to portfolio management, digital engineering, digital acquisition, and mission engineering? Are there one or two particularly thorny issues that you think need to be resolved before we'll get to where we need to with regard to these three concepts?
So I'll start in the middle with the mission engineering, because I think that's the most important part of this, is to get the department to start to think in terms of missions versus programs. We're very program oriented, especially on the acquisition side, and especially on Congress's side, that we fixate on the F-35, the Columbia, the Ford, FARA, these big programs that give us unbelievable capabilities. But it's the understanding of where those great capabilities lie in a kill chain, where you really can illuminate what you really need to be doing and where you really need to be investing funds, because an F-35 is useless unless it has weapons, unless it has communications telling it, where the bad guys are. So you need all those other parts. So that mission engineering piece is critical, and adopting that mission engineering across the department is a challenge because it's not easy to do. The digital engineering piece falls right in with that, because in order to build the mission architecture, we need to understand how each one of the different each systems of systems perform. So having those digital twins and being able to connect those things together will allow us to make much more strategic decisions on how a change in one piece of that kill chain will affect the overall performance of that mission. And if we've now decided that's a high priority mission, that's where we want to invest the money. The portfolios come in by providing the basis for, well, what do we currently have for our mission architecture, and either systems in development or systems that are fielded? What is going on from a research and engineering perspective in each one of those portfolios? What do our partners have in each one of those areas? And then what's the intelligence telling us? So by pulling all three of those things together, we're trying to put together a means for demonstrating to senior leaders that when they make a decision on a program, it's not just that one program they're making a decision on. It's what that program does for multiple kill chains, and what a little bit of a change, adding the Block 4 capability to the F-35, how that affects the kill chain and how that affects all the interoperability between. So I see the three as very tied together, and that is not a quick thing to do, and it will take a little while for the department to really understand how to utilize that entire concept. Very encouraged by what the folks in R&E are doing with their mission engineering studies that they're doing, and how they're going to use mission engineering to support Ryder. Very encouraged by what the Joint Staff is doing on their capability portfolio management reviews. where they're really looking at it from a capabilities-based lens of, what are the major capabilities that we need to provide the warfighter, and then letting A&S and R&E decide, hey, this is the best way, along with the services, how to fulfill that capability need.
Thank you, Chris. Chris, I'll go back to the question I had asked you, perhaps not that cleanly, relating to relational contracting practices. A clarification from Roberto says, what he's really alluding to is the development of a foundation of trust, specification of mutual goals, and governance structures that keep expectations in alignment, interests in alignment, essentially focusing on joint success. Any thoughts you have of what sorts of things are being put in place as part of the adaptive acquisition framework to cause that sort of a governance structure to help both sides of the contract achieve success?
So that is a marvelous question. So Mr. Ticklett, who's the Lockheed CEO, gave a talk at CSIS 2 weeks ago where it talked about how Lockheed is putting together technology roadmaps. I've sat with Raytheon and looked at what they're doing from a mission engineering perspective. Sat with the CTO for Northrop Grumman and talked about what they're doing from a mission engineering perspective and a portfolio management perspective. So these ideas have permeated out into industry, and it's on my shoulders. I need to work with some of the industry associations to gather with our folks in R&E, folks in CAPE, folks in joint staff, with industry to talk about how do we put together a lexicon so that we can all talk about digital engineering, mission engineering, portfolio management in a way that makes sense in our conversations with each other, so they have a better idea of where to make their investments and where the department is going, how to better communicate to Congress exactly what we're trying to do so that both we and industry are on the same sheet of music, and also here in the building ensure that we're communicating when we say we think we can get something done in a certain amount of time for a certain amount of money. That's not just an engineering estimate. That's something that's based on some sort of digital engineering that's been done to back it all up. So I think in what we're embarking on is a very close relationship with industry to really understand how their capabilities can help us fulfill those critical mission threads. And I think that's going to help us both understand where to make the critical investments in the future.
Thank you, Chris. And I saved the most self-serving question for the end. And before I ask you this question, just a little bit of a context for you. As Dr. Kaminski also mentioned, we have approximately 450 people, 470 people who've registered for today, about 10% in person and 90% online. And I would say that of the 450 or so, 50 of our colleagues who registered for today are from the national laboratories and the FFRDCs. The other 400 are just about evenly split between industry, government, and academia. So we have 100 plus faculty members and PhD students who are with us for the AIRC Day. And so here's the question, Chris. When you think about academia as a partner in helping with acquisition outcomes, bringing innovation and applied research to bear, are there specific areas where you think academia is particularly geared to have an impact?
So that's a great question, Dinesh. So 2 weeks ago, we did an offsite down at the Defense Acquisition University, which has a great staff of people who think about acquisition around the clock. And I gave them a copy of the draft National Defense Strategy and asked them for their comments on that. And the important part of that is we need people who have some time to think about bigger questions than we deal with on a daily basis here in the building. We're busily trying to answer questions that come from the Secretary, the Deputy, Congress. We're trying to make sure that programs stay on schedule, on budget. So we don't have a lot of luxury of time to sit back and think about what it is that we need to do to the acquisition system in order to make it more responsive to what we see as a rapidly accelerating peer competitor. So the thing that I would ask the most for industry and academia is we're looking for innovative thought on acquisition. And what most impresses me about AIRC is that you've brought such a broad range of people together. My past experience working on MURIs in the Department of Defense is that we don't know what we don't know. Worked on 3 or 4 MURIs in my career, and it was always amazing to me the new thoughts and the ideas that academia can bring to the table that are perspectives that we didn't really think about. And in order for us to be competitive, we need those new ideas. Not saying that we haven't done a lot of work on the acquisition system in the last 4 years, but we need to continue to improve how we make, how we go from the warfighter has a need to the warfighter has a capability in their hands. And whether that's better requirements, better acquisition, better motivation of our industry workforce, whether we've got industry positioned correctly to be responsive to the types of things that we need. I think what I'm really looking for is the things that I don't think about every day. And I think that's really the strength of what AIRC brings is new people looking at this from a different perspective.
Chris, I don't think you could have articulated a better setup for the panel that follows your keynote. Thank you so much for participating in today's activities. I really appreciate your thoughts and insights.
Thank you, Dinesh. It's always fun answering the questions. I'm happy to, I really like the questions. People are really thinking, they're challenging us, and please continue to do that. So back to you for the panel.
Thank you, Chris.